this is what I know. My great 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 grandmother, my 7th great grandmother, LaLi, was a slave on a plantation in South Carolina in 1741 up to 1750, when something happened. Something happened. First, the master died. Then first the master died, and then twins were born, one of whom lived and was my 5th great grandmother. 5th great grandmother. And her mother died, and her father died. All this happened in about a week. And the reason why we know this is because, fortunately, LaLi could read. We don't know why she could read. We don't know how she learned. Like, maybe it was part of her job, but we kind of doubt it. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But she actually had, all we have now are like fragments and pieces of paper and things that she wrote on. But we do have that, because her granddaughter saved this stuff. And one of the things that the granddaughter had from LaLi was this sheet that looks like it was ripped out of a ledger book. Just really, it's just so amazing. There's this sheet of like yellow, blurry, stained paper that's got the name of the master, the name of his wife, the name of all 5 of their children who died in infancy. Like, they were like a day old. I think one was stillborn, or maybe 2 were stillborn. One lived to be 11 months, but they all died. All of them. So that, and, on down to LaLi, my 7th great grandmother. And by most of the slaves' names is the letter B. And if you look right above on the sheet, race is printed there. And they don't print the master's name or the wife's name or the baby's names, but they have the race of the slaves. And LaLi was an M, and Elizabeth was a B. And there were more B's than there were M's. And M, there's just no question in our minds. No, we've never consulted anybody, but just logically, it stands for mulatto, which means that they were mixed. My 6th great grandfather's name was Henry, and after his name is Junior, and the master's name was Henry, and by his name is Henry Sr. Well, we all know it happened. So, and all of us find that, well, it'd be interesting anyway, just because it's our family history, but it's even more interesting because one of the other things that they had a column for was whether a person who's on this list was insane. And by LaLi's name, it says insane. So that's why we think that she probably didn't learn to read because it was part of her job. Is just, but we have no idea what happened. That resulted in all these deaths of these people who, by blood, they were related. And there's no mention of disease. We can't find anything like that. We don't see anything like that in any of the other pieces of paper that LaLi put down. Some of which are printed, like from books or something, and some of which it was things that she wrote. And most of it's kind of crazy and it doesn't make any sense. But part of the reason why we can't make any sense out of it is because all we have is pieces, fragments. We kind of suspect that in at least one of the deaths there was some kind of foul play, because scrawled in a different ink, a different hand, completely different handwriting, next to Blue's name, the daughter-in-law of LaLi, and by blood, the daughter-in-law of Henry Sr., the owner of the plantation. But scrawled in next to Blue's name is dead, not in childbirth, kilt, like K-I-L-T, killed. So she died, but she didn't die in childbirth. And we know that she had twins and they lived. One of them died when it was 13 months old, I think. No, 18 months old. And the other one lived. And somebody killed her. Or something killed her. But so I have found out something very interesting, not about what happened to Blue, my 7th grade grandmother LaLi's daughter-in-law, the one with the twins who died but not in childbirth. She was killed. Her daughter, the twin that survived, also knew how to read. And she had sort of a diary. This twin, Mary, kept a diary. And one thing that we know for sure is that the man who bought her was a widower, and she had known him all her life, and they lived in the house together, and they raised children together. Mary knew how to read and write, and she had a husband who I guess cared about her, and the kids that he had with her. And I don't know what happened to their daughter. Maybe she died in childbirth. Unfortunately, we don't have one of those census pages of all the property who were Negroes, and so we don't know like anything about the birth and death beyond what is in Mary's diary. And there isn't really anything on the scraps of paper that my great grandmother LaLi left. But anyway, their son, we know this for sure because she wrote it, and I mean, you can well imagine why she would write about how worried she was the day that her 6-year-old son announced to her that he was not going to be a slave. we're getting into the 1800s, and there were beginning to be slavery revolts, and when they happened, a lot of people died, and they were not white people. They were Negro slaves who were trying to be free like human beings are supposed to be, and like they should be, and especially if you think about all the work they're putting into building this country, and we'll give you a bag of corn for your trouble, and maybe we won't beat you tomorrow. Well, anyway, this little boy, Henry, they named him Henry, and I think I've seen something that makes a reference to Henry the Third. A lot of it's for this kid. And apparently they were so worried that he would get involved in one of the slavery revolts, they sent him to Boston. He was placed in the household as an apprentice to a printer in Boston, and this printer we know was a Quaker. So we're finding stuff out gradually. We know that he did become a printer, and that he eventually owned property, and we assume he had a family, but we don't really know. We don't really know many of the details about that yet. Well, I found out something pretty awful about Henry the Third. First there was Henry the Master, and then there was his son Henry Jr., who was a mulatto slave, LaLi's son, and the master's son, which is pretty tacky. But even tackier than that is what we found out about Henry the Third was that he abandoned his family. He was only 22 when he bought a house. He married this woman who was not as educated as he was, although she was a free woman and a Quaker. It seems like most of the people in his life who were important in Boston were Quakers, and I'm sure he met her the way that he accomplished everything. Like the man he was apprenticed to was a Quaker who his parents made contact with from South Carolina when they wanted to send him someplace where he wouldn't wind up in the kind of trouble that rebellious slaves wound up in. Even though he and his sister weren't raised like slaves, that his parents couldn't say they were married. It wasn't like it was legal that they were married. I'm sure that they had to be really discreet so that the neighbors wouldn't come and burn down their house and put them in jail and beat them and torture them and all the really horrible things that we know really did happen to slaves. He was a bad husband and a bad father. And he had 3 children and disappeared when they were babies. So he left her with these babies, and she was a seamstress but she wasn't very smart, and she wasn't very educated, and she really, and she was black, you know. I mean, she might have been a free woman, but I mean, it's still pretty bad some places in this country for black people. But, you know, this is like the early 1800s, the first half of the 1800s. Only one of Henry III's children was a female, and she's the ancestor that I come from. And she was a seamstress like her mother. She was named Mary, after her grandmother, Harry III's mother. And she was really talented and really smart, and she was a seamstress for really, really fine clothes. She was really accomplished and read, and I think she had managed to learn how to play piano or music somehow, maybe at church, probably at church. So she was 18 or 19 years old, and she was doing okay. And she doesn't say that her two brothers weren't doing okay. She hadn't seen them since they were like 12, 13 years old, because they had all gone off to different families to learn a trade. And their father contacts them. But he had gone to sea, and he, I think he worked primarily on whaling ships, but also fishing boats and some merchant ships. I guess he, you know, they say people fall in love with the sea, and that's their wife. And he had managed to save a little cash, and he contacted his children. And Mary, his daughter, says that he looked thin and weak and old. He gave them his money, the money he had saved all these years as a sailor. And it was the last time she saw her brothers, was the time that they were called together, brought together by their father. And it was the last time she saw or heard from her father. It's like he just went into the fog, back onto a boat